So if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 20. And we're going to read about one of my favorite people. He gets a bad rap, but I love this guy. His name is Thomas. You guys know Thomas? You all know Thomas? You might know Thomas. You might not know Thomas. You're about to get to know Thomas a little bit. We're about to hang out with Thomas this morning. And it's going to be a good time. So we're reading on Thomas, and we're actually jumping in as we open up the scriptures. We're jumping into a part of the story where Jesus had just risen from the dead, and he appeared to his disciples, and everybody was there except good old Thomas. Thomas, he was not there. We don't know what he was doing. We don't know where he was at. He wasn't there. And so we're jumping into the story right after this happens. And so John chapter 20, we're going to start reading today from verse 24. Are you there? If not, it's okay. We're going to have it up on the screen. But verse 24, it says, "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.'" We have seen Jesus. We've seen him. And I love Thomas' response. It's so good. Gotta love Thomas. He says, "But he said to them, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe.'" Good old Thomas. There's no way. I will not believe. So then the story jumps forward a week. That scene ends there. Then we go forward about a week. Verse 26, it says, "A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them." Good job. Thomas was there this time. "And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' Then he said to Thomas," he zeroes in on Thomas. "All right, Tommy boy, it's you and me time." And he says, "Put your finger here, Thomas. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And I want to add these next few verses. We're going to continue on. So verse 30, now the author of this gospel, his name is John, the guy who's writing all of this down. He's about to tell us why he's writing all of this down, why he's including these stories. And he says, "Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." Amen. So today I want to share a message with you, and I'm titling it, "Doubting God." Doubting God. Has anybody taken the Myers-Briggs test? Do you guys know what the Myers-Briggs, a few people have taken the Myers-Briggs. Well, on the Myers-Briggs test, I personally, I'm very heavy on the T. And if you don't know what the Myers-Briggs is and you don't know what that means at all, it's a kind of a personality test that tells you a little bit about yourself. And me personally, I'm heavy on T. And what that means, it stands for thinking, right? So I'm pretty heavy T, a thinker. And the way they say it is somebody who makes decisions using logical analysis, objectively weighs pros and cons, values honesty, consistency, and fairness. Now, that is pretty heavily where I lean. And I have a little bit of a feeling that so does my good friend Thomas here. Somebody comes to him, the people he's been closest to for the last 3 years, they come to him and say, "We have seen Jesus. Yeah, we know he died, but he rose from the dead." And Thomas was like, "No way. Unless I get some evidence, unless I see it for myself, unless I have a reason to believe it, I will not." And you might be in here today and you might relate to Thomas a little bit. And the truth is, Thomas gets a bad rap. He's actually known, if you are around church at all and people talk about Thomas, his nickname is Doubting Thomas. That's what church people call him. This dude doubted one time. And that's his whole identity, Doubting Thomas. But see, the truth is that so do people who often think like Thomas, people who have questions, or people who sometimes begin to show any sort of doubt. They were like, Jesus rose from the grave. Thomas is like, no way. Even though he has seen everything that Jesus did, everything that he has taught, they saw all the miracles, and that this moment, he doubted. This moment, he wanted evidence. He wanted to have a reason to believe. And often, Thomas gets a bad rap. And the truth is, Barna Group did a study about in 2017 where they did an interview about over 1,000 people of adults that are 18 and over. And in these interviews, they interviewed people who were Christians. And they found that it's actually, the number's kind of crazy, 65% of the people who were Christians struggled with some sort of doubt. And not only that, but they found that the most common response to people who were struggling with doubt, which was about 45% of them in this study, was the most common response to the doubt was to actually leave the church. That was the number one response to people facing doubt. As a matter of fact, recently we've been starting to see this in our culture, in Christian culture at a large. Recently, a musician for one of the largest Christian bands in the world, you guys have all heard of him, recently posted this on his social media. He said, after growing up in a Christian home, being a pastor's kid, playing and singing in a Christian band, and having the word Christian in front of most of the things in my life, I am now finding that I no longer believe in God. If God is all loving and all powerful, why is there evil in the world? Can he not do anything about it? Does he choose not to? If God is loving, why does he send people to hell? These are questions that everyone asks in their head, but not as many ask out loud. The church often dismisses them with glib religious catchphrases like, just have faith, or God works in mysterious ways. And when you narrow down the search to the younger crowd, Barna did a more recent study. It's actually only like a year old now, where they found that 64% of people who are 18 to 29 years old leave the church after at one point being a part of it. And they found in this study that they leave the church as soon as they go and encounter different worldviews and thoughts in college and all of these things, and they begin to have questions, and they don't know how to work through all of these things. Another worship leader for a song that every church has sung his songs recently said, I'm not in anymore. I want genuine truth, not the I just believe it kind of truth. Science keeps piercing the truth of every religion. Lots of things help people change their lives, not just one version of God. Got so much more to say, but for me, I'm keeping it real. The reality is, this is happening in our world, in our culture at large. And these conversations need to happen, especially within the church. And so I want to take these few verses and I want to point out a few things for us as a community, for us as a church. And I want to share some thoughts for us today. And so my first thought is for our church, for our community right here. And the first thought is actually a question for you and for me. And the question is, what kind of church will we be? What kind of church will we be? I want you to notice how Jesus answers Thomas in the verses that we just read. How does Jesus, just think about it for a second. How do you think God would answer a statement like Thomas's? There is no way I will believe unless I see it for myself. How do you think God would answer such a statement? If I did not have these verses laying in front of me, I would not think too favorably. I would think, man, God would probably be like mad or something at that statement. But Jesus, he approaches Thomas and answers differently than I would have expected. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. And if I could speak to our church for a moment, if I could pastorally just speak to our community. You might be here and you might be a seasoned Christian, or you might be here and doubt and questions are not necessarily something you're facing right now. It's not necessarily an obstacle in your life or something that is going on in your Christian faith. I want you to know that there is a generation, two now actually. I need you to know, church, that there is a couple generations now that are having a very, very difficult time with their faith. And the reality is that most of them, many of them who are having this difficult time, are not finding community, support, and love within the church. They're finding it outside of the church. The reality is Gen Z and millennials who are now in their 30s, all the way down to high schoolers, are having a harder and harder time seeing the church as the place to work through and think through this new world that they are encountering, this new world that they are living in. The reality is that these young people, that they are having a harder time seeing the church as the place to think through and work through everything they're encountering online, everything that they are encountering at school, and everything they're encountering among their peers. And this is something that matters to all of us. And the question for us is, church, what does it look like in our community when somebody begins to have questions or doubts? What does it look like in our community when someone has doubts or questions about a deeply held belief that you might have? What does that look like here? And if you've been to the home course, you would know that the heart of our church, if you've been, we have two pieces to the heart of our church. And one of them is that we would be a place where people could come and explore Jesus, that they could come and explore Christianity, explore Jesus, explore faith, that people who are wondering, that people who are wandering, that people who have questions and who have doubts could come here and work through them and not feel judged, not feel like they are outsiders, not feel like they are less than, but they can come here and this would be a place that would be safe for them. That is a big piece of the heart of our church. And the reality is, church, as we look to the future, as we look and think of the generations that are coming, and as we think of the city that we are a church in, if I could just speak pastorally for a second, we sense a strong calling from the Lord to be that kind of church. Will we be a church that meets the time where it's at, that meets the generations that are coming where they are at? And truly, the call for us as a community is to be a church that would respond as Jesus responded, as Jesus responds to Thomas. How did Jesus choose to respond to Thomas? Well, first he says, Thomas, come here. Come look, Thomas. Thomas, come here. Come here. Look at my hands. Thomas, look at my side. Thomas, come and look. And then he says, Thomas, stop doubting and believe. See, what is Jesus doing here? Jesus is saying, Thomas, come and look. Jesus is meeting him where he's at. He is loving him. He is not casting him away. He is not mocking him or belittling him. He meets Thomas where he is at. And he says, Thomas, come and look. But he doesn't stop there. He also calls him to truth. He calls him to believe. He says, Thomas, stop doubting and believe. And what he is doing is what we are called to do. He is holding love and truth together. And this is our calling, church, that we would hold love and truth together as a community. And I'm sorry, this is a super simplistic way of talking about something that is so complex and complicated. But the truth is, in Jesus, we see both of these held together. And not just in these instances, not just in this one story, but in who he was. How Jesus treated people, how he talked, how he spoke, how he encountered people. We see Jesus beautifully hold both of these together in his hands. And this is our calling. The reality is, I could be up here and as a pastor give you 3 steps towards holding love and truth together. Let's do this, and let's do this. But it's not just something we do. It's the people that we are. This is not something Jesus did. It's who he was. And our calling, church, is not just to follow this 1, 2, 3 step. It's to become like Jesus. If there is one thing I hear when talking to people that are skeptical, when talking to people that are wandering or exploring or been hurt by the church, if there is one thing I hear is if only Christians would be like Jesus. And I would have to agree. We all are in process. We all are on a journey, but the truth is, if we could become little by little more like Jesus. Church, our calling is to hold truth and love together. Often they can be separated and you get distortions of each. There's people who talk truth, but the truth lacks love. That's not really truth. You can talk love all you want, but if love lacks truth, it's not really love. And what I love about Jesus, the life he lived, the person he was, is he holds both of them together. And this is our calling, church, that we would learn from Jesus in the messiness, in the complexity, in the hardness of life and real life questions and situations, that we would seek to become like Jesus. And where do we start? We start with responding like Jesus responded. I think it starts with respect. Jesus, the God of the universe, would show respect to the doubt of one person. Thomas said, "There is no way I will believe unless I see it for myself." And Jesus, showing him undeserving grace and love, says, "Thomas, come and look." And this is our call. What kind of church will we be? What kind of community are we becoming? What does it look like for truly those who are exploring and wondering and wandering to come into our community? And this is not something that's just spoken of from stage, because the honest truth is that the experience of people about our church won't be mostly what's talked about on stage, but it's interactions with every one of us. And this is our calling, for us to be, not just go to church, but to be the church for today's time. Will we hold love and truth together? Will we make space for people who have questions? Will we make space for people who are wrestling with doubts? Will we be a church that is becoming more and more like Jesus? The second thought I have, and this is if you are in the room and if you are having questions and if you have doubts, if you are in here and you really resonate with Thomas, you're like, man, I don't know, I have a hard time just believing. I have a hard time just having faith because I should, or I think I should believe because it's the right thing to do, or because I feel like I should, or I have a hard time with blind faith. You might be in here, that might be you. You might know somebody who is going through that. I want you to know, my second thought is the search for truth is a good thing. The search for truth is a good thing. Jesus goes on and he continues his response to Thomas. And he says, then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And you could take this statement and you could think, all right, well, Jesus is telling him that he should have just believed without having to see, right? Jesus is trying to get him to know, you should have just had faith, Thomas. You should have just believed. Blessed are those who just believe, who just have faith. Well, we know that the author of this gospel did not actually take the words of Jesus to mean that. Because what does he go on to say in the next few verses? He goes on to say, we write these things so that you may believe. And I want you to notice for a moment that this author who is writing this gospel down is writing it because he knew that there would be other Thomases that are searching for truth. And what Jesus was essentially saying, Jesus was saying, blessed are those who have not seen. Because the truth is, the reality is, Thomas had the privilege of seeing, but he knew that there was a time that was coming where that would not be the case. And so who are those who are blessed without seeing? That's you and I. But John wrote this gospel because it's not that you would believe without any evidence. It's not that you would believe and just blindly believe because you should. No, he wrote it for those people who are searching for truth. And the reality is, I want you to hear it today. If you are doubting, if you are questioning, if you are exploring, if you're wandering, the search for truth is a good thing. And that might be weird hearing at church, because you would think that you wouldn't hear that at somewhere like this. But the reality is, a lot of people feel like church is against people searching for truth. That they would get somehow defensive or scared of people searching for truth. But Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I think we should be the least scared people on earth. The search for truth is a good thing. But we also have to acknowledge, and you might be in here in the room and you might be feeling this, that the search can be confusing, can be hard, can be frustrating when you have questions, when you have doubts, when you should have it all together, when you should believe. Don't you believe this by now? How long have you been a Christian? You're this and you're that. When you should be there, or when you want to believe, when you want to just have faith, but you have questions. The search for truth can be difficult. And I want you to hear that today, that it can be. It can be very, very hard. See, the reality is, I know how difficult it can be to hear various different perspectives on the same thing. How confusing that can be, how frustrating that can be, especially when it comes to the search for truth. And especially in our world today, you might even be uneasy at the fact that I'm saying the word truth so much. Like, in our world, is it even possible to know truth? Is it even possible to know what is true and what isn't? There is no such thing as truth. Every truth is just your truth, your idea, your perspective. I mean, has anybody read the news lately? You know what I mean? Is there any way to know what is true? I used to keep up with football quite a bit. And obviously, I can't watch the games very much because I'm a little occupied on Sunday mornings, but I would have this app where I would read articles about the games and catch up, on football. And this app, I would read different articles, and, I would see this article, and it'd be so funny. I would read this article from the winning team, City, and they would talk about how good the offense was or how good this one player did. And then you would read the article from the losing team, City, and they would talk about how bad the weather conditions were or how one-sided the refs were, right? And they would put spin on things, and they would put spin on the game for sure. But the issue is, in our world today, people are getting lost in the spin. Everything is spin. Everything is someone's thoughts. Everything is someone's perspective. But here's the truth. And here's what I would want to propose to you today, that even in those articles, there are things that were just true. Like the game had a final score. The final score was just true. Who scored and when they scored, those were just true. And it's in this world that Jesus' provocative claim of saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus claims into our world today, there is truth. And I have to say, it might not be as all-encompassing and black and white as cultural Christianity has made it seem, but it is not as scarce or non-existent as our world makes it seem. Into this world of confusion, into this world of spin, into this world of perspectives and opinion, Jesus makes the claim, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The author of our gospel today says, I write this so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. There is a claim of truth. So where do you begin? If you're here and you have questions, where would you start? Where would you begin on this search? Well, I would say that what matters to us is the same thing that matters to Thomas. And it is the question, did Jesus truly rise from the dead? Is Easter real? Did Jesus actually rise from the dead over 2,000 years ago? Because the truth is, the basis of Christianity is a historical event. Christianity exists because of the claims that Jesus, 2,000 years ago, rose from the dead. It claims that something happened. And if you hear, and if you have questions, and if you have doubts, you can hear spin on all sorts of different things. You can hear opinions on all sorts of different things. But if Jesus actually rose from the dead, it changes everything. It absolutely changes it all. You are free to investigate and ask questions from a basis of a reality. If Jesus is alive today, if he actually rose from the grave, that changes it all. And so if you are here and you resonate with that and you have questions and you have doubts, I actually have a few book recommendations for you out in the lobby. And I encourage you to look at them, to pick some of them up. The first one is an author who who takes a historical view of the resurrection. And what does he do? He gives you some of the scores, some of the things that we know, some of the things that there is no historian, regardless of faith, that argues differently. And he talks about what these things mean for the historical validity of the resurrection of Jesus. Another one is written by one of the greatest New Testament scholars and authors of the New Testament time period. And then the last one I would recommend to everybody. This might be one of the most incredible ways to spend the month from here until Easter. It's called Hope in Times of Fear: The Resurrection and the Meaning of Easter. And I would encourage you, pick this book up. The other two are kind of academic if you really want to dig deep, if you want to look into it, if you want to invest time. This one by Tim Keller, Hope in Times of Fear, I'd recommend everybody to pick that up during this Easter season. Get a perspective, be refreshed and refilled on what is Easter, because the reality is, church, Easter is not just something that we celebrate that's like, yay, good, this is something we do on the side. The reality is, Easter changed everything. The significance of Easter and Jesus rising from the grave cannot be overstated. And so I invite you, begin there, but I will end with this, and the worship team can start coming back up. I will end with this. I invite you to start there, but it does not end there. It does not end there. Because see, Jesus here, he says, blessed are you, for you have believed because you have seen, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And then the author says, we write this so that you may believe. And what is he doing here? He is calling you into the tension of Jesus saying, Thomas, come and look, and then Jesus saying, Thomas, believe. He is inviting you to the tension of faith. If you are here and you have questions, if you're online and you are doubting and you are struggling with believing, man, these verses invite you to think through it, to look through it, to think about it, to find the evidence, to find the reasons. But these verses also call you and invite you to faith. Because the reality is, the scriptures say, without faith, it is impossible to please God. The reality is, it will take faith. And here's what I need you to hear. If you hear anything else, hear this. The best part of Christianity, the absolute best part of Christianity is not having all your questions answered. And don't get me wrong, I love that. For someone who's wired the way I am, I love that. But the best part of Christianity is not having all your questions answered. The best part of Christianity is that you can know God. And this is what differentiates it from everything else on earth. Not only a God that you can investigate, but a God that you can know personally. And that is what makes Christianity what it is. You can investigate and you can look and you can search, and I encourage you to do so. It is an incredible journey of finding that Jesus is the truth, not just because you have to take someone else's word for it, but because you see that there is no other truth like the truth of Jesus and the resurrection. That is amazing. Don't get me wrong, I love that. And that is one of the things that is why I can put all my faith and trust in Jesus. But that is not the best part of this. It is that he is a personal God that you can know. And what I need you to know today, Thomas, is he's not offended by you. He's not scared of your questions. He's not scared of your doubts. Actually, he calls people just like you. One of my favorite things of this verse that we read today is that Jesus knew Thomas. Jesus made Thomas. He knew the way that he was wired. He knew the way that he would think. He knew the way that he was. And Jesus called Thomas to be one of his 12 disciples. And I don't know if you're in here and you feel like, I'm not sure if faith is for me. I feel out of place among these people who seem to just believe and have it all together. I'm not sure if I fit in here. I want you to know today, there is a place for Thomas with Jesus. There is a place for you